Hey, welcome to the Pat Tyson house here in Spokane, Washington. Come on in. The first thing I want to show you guys here today is kind of the take on something that occurred 50 years ago in Knoxville, Tennessee, the 50th anniversary of Oregon's first NCAA championship team. The team results here in this area here, we're on top. Washington State, who had beaten us two previous times, are in second. Big upset. And on this team, Prefontaine, number one man, passed away a few years ago. And number two man, Spokane, who's going to be on our show, Randy James. I'm number three, Spokane. So Spokane, we got 33% of our team here, which is cool. It may not be the exact jersey that I wore there, but this is basically what we had. So again, 6 guys, not 7. Tight budget at Oregon, no Phil Knight money, and we pick off the very first cross country title in Oregon history. Off to the trophy. We obviously had a bigger trophy than this, but this is the one that each member of our team got. And again, I'm really proud of that day. It was one of those, not bad for a guy that was, not recruited, walk on at Oregon and be a part of something real special. They're the 6 athletes. Bill Dillinger on the far right, Bill Bowerman, co-founder of Nike, in there. Randy James, I'm going to point to Randy. Randy, Ferris High School boy. Pat Tyson coached at Mead for many years now at Gonzaga. Another picture of our team with myself in the front, and just to the right of me is Randy James. I thought it would be important to have you see our guest. A bunch of years later, we got inducted into the University of Oregon Hall of Fame, this team. So here we are. My name's on this one, and I'm real proud of that, and I know our teammates are too. Again, I want to welcome everybody to our podcast here in Spokane, our very first one. We're going to title our whole series Footprints. And our guest, our first series under Footprints, I've got my former teammate from Oregon, Randy James, former Ferris Saxon, and myself, of course, Pat Tyson. I'm a teacher here at Gonzaga University. Actually, coaching is my profession. Taught at Mead High School for a bunch of years. Randy, tell us a little bit about your background in Spokane to start with.
Born and raised Spokane. Went to Adams Grade School and Ferris High School. Then I ultimately taught 39 years in Spokane Public Schools, the last 32 at North Central High School. Raised my family in Spokane.
So that's a little bit about Randy's roots. My roots, again, I grew up in Tacoma, but came to Spokane in 1986. To take over the Mead Panthers, and I taught there for 20 years. And then I took over Gonzaga in the year 2008, and I'm on year 14. So that's a little bit of background of us. And what we're going to be talking about today and focusing in is on something very, very special. In November, in running, especially at the college level, we are in the midst of the NCAA championship season. And 50 years ago, this month, 33% of Spokane, Randy James and myself, were members, 6-member team that competed in Knoxville, Tennessee. And one of our members was a guy named Steve Prefontaine. And we want to always bring him up in our series of Footprints because big time. He influenced, Randy influenced me so greatly, but we were the champions of the world, collegiate world, and the very first in Oregon history, one of the first NCAA titles in Oregon history. And here we are to talk about that event and some of the people that have influenced us to get to where we are. A lot of these influences are Spokane related. So Randy, let's just go back. It's 50 years ago. We're in Knoxville, Tennessee. Give us some of your memories.
Oh my gosh. For people to kind of put it in perspective, the Nationals were on the Monday of Thanksgiving week, historically for years and years, and they moved it to Saturday. So think about that. It'd be the 22nd. It will be the 50th anniversary of this race. I can remember, one, it was exciting to be going to the Nationals and that, but they had an unusually cold spell go through. And that morning it was just really, really cold. Not just a little bit of cold, but it was really cold. And I think that at race time, I think it was still in the 20s, if not below that. But I can remember the look on people's faces when we went on our morning run. And I can still remember getting chased by a dog. We all were in that. But we went and we purposely ran through the cafeteria. Everybody's down getting their pre-race meal. And we all had our Oregon uniforms on. They're going, they're running? It's cold out there. And they're running the morning before a race because the race was always at 11 o'clock. I remember that really, really well. And I remember the really steep hill on that course. There was a really steep hill. I think it was on the campus of University of Tennessee, but I think it was also like a golf course.
Yeah, Fox Den Golf Course in Knoxville.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, WSU had beaten us in Northern Divisions, and Northern Division was only 4 teams back then. In the Pac-8s, it was only 8s. They'd beaten us there, so they were actually ranked number 1 at the time. And I don't know if we were ranked 2nd, 3rd, or 4th at that time, just because of us being beaten just in Northern Divisions and in the Pac-8s.
Yeah, remember we were actually, I believe, 3rd in the Northern Division.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, wow, this team's going to go on about 4 weeks later and win the NCAA title. So, so we're in Knoxville, and we have this. It wasn't just you and I, but we also had a guy that was the number 1 runner in America, going to be chased by a guy that could have been the number 1 runner in America from Minnesota named Gary Bjorklund.
Yeah.
So, what was it like for you to have Pre as a teammate?
Oh, gosh. It was remarkable. Just from the first time I met him, he always had that, all of what you heard and that aura. Just this really, really neat guy. And that I can remember when I first walked onto campus and I had a math class that ran late, and he made everybody wait so I could have somebody to run with. And he wasn't, it wasn't that like prima donna type person. He was a good guy. Really good guy. And he absolutely loved being a teammate. He was naturally one of the best runners in the nation. Bjorklund had won the 6 mile the spring before, so he was a really good runner. And that was going to be quite the tight race. And I think he really valued racing and beating people, but he really valued being on the team with us in that. And I remember that really well.
So, we get 3rd in the Northern Division. We get 2nd at the Pac-8 championship. Are we going to go to the NCAA championship?
Not a chance. Oregon, they really didn't have a whole lot of money, or at least that's what we were told. There was no chance they're going to send us. I mean, why would you send somebody? I think we'd taken 2nd the 2 years before, only by 1 point the year before to Villanova in that. And we actually came home with the trophy. And a guy had fallen. They reviewed the film, and they changed our place to 2nd to Villanova. And a Villanova runner just beat me, too. So if I'd beaten him, we would have won. And so, yeah, I think it was going to cost him like $200 to send us, airfare and room and board and everything, each individual. And that was a lot of money back then. So, yeah, I don't think we were going to go.
So begs, pleads, demands, might be a better word.
Yeah.
That if the team doesn't go, he doesn't go.
Yeah. He stood up for us.
And so, for whatever reason, I don't even remember, 7 gentlemen did not get on the plane, only 6. And I guess I would bet that was part of the Oregon lack of budget then, that led only 6 runners going. And of those 6, 50% were walk-ons, myself included, and Mark Savage, and Mike Long, Red Ant.
Red Ant.
and then there was Pre, and you were the state champion out of Ferris, winning by nearly a minute after being spiked in blood dripping out of your foot. and of course a guy named Rick Ritchie out of British Columbia.
Yeah.
So we're there, Pre got us there, we're lined up. And do you remember much about the press and what they were doing with Pre?
Yeah, I do remember that a fair amount, just because they always wanted a piece of him, and they would be right in his face. So he's trying to warm up, and the press was there. He's trying to get his shoes on. Press is there. He's stretching. Press is there. He's trying to go and visit with us and talking about, because, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. He's that little pep talk that he'd give us, and the press was there. For him to have his composure and still not just lose it with all these people in his face and cameras and that, showed he was very poised in that. And he had he had a mission. Gary Bjorklund was a very real threat. It was going to be really challenging to beat him. I think he only beat him like for 40 yards or whatever. And that one of his closest, when you think about his cross-country races, one of his closest as far as people being behind him in that. So, yeah, I remember that well.
So, the race is over. And Pre wins.
Yeah.
And do you remember what Coach Dellinger told you after the race? Did he come up to you? Is there any real recollections? Because with me, Bill came up and asked me, how come you let that Villanova guy beat you at the finish line? And it happened to be Marty LaCory. And for those people who don't know, Marty LaCory was the second, actually the third American high school kid to break 4 minutes.
And one of the best runners in America.
One of the best, and he's a Nova boy. And he went by me, and I went by him, and he went by me, and I went by him over the last mile. Then he got me at the end, and Bill told me, "Why? How come you let Marty LaCory beat you?" Jokingly, of course. And he had already heard that we were winning the meet.
Yeah.
And he knew that I wasn't Mr. Speedster with a kick, and so it was his way of just kind of pricking me a little bit, but. You don't remember anything else? How about just...
He was excited because he knew I was an All-American.
Yeah.
And, up to that time, Bowerman was always had his name on everything as far as he was the coach of all the teams in that. And I think that race was like one of Bill's first All-Americans. He had Steve always, but then in cross country, it would have been Steve, and then myself was All-American. Rick Ritchie, I think, was an All-American the year before. And Mike McClendon, I think, an All-American the year before that. So there was just a handful up to that point in that. He was pretty darn excited.
And Bill had only been, Dellinger we're talking about, had only been the distance running coach for about 4 years.
Yeah.
And so here he is on his first NCAA championship team. Bill Bowerman wasn't so much a cross-country kind of guy.
No.
And really didn't really want us to focus on it very much. But I noticed in the picture, that Bill was in the picture too. He kind of thought this NCAA championship trophy is pretty cool.
Yeah, he liked being in that picture.
So what was your memories or about after we win the trophy and there's an awards, I believe at the hotel.
Yeah.
In the assembly room there. Do you remember much of that?
I do, because I remember it being so just downplayed. It was just this, I don't even know if there was a stage. If the stage, it was 6 inches tall, and there was a bunch of chairs, folding chairs, just the old metal chairs. And we sat there, and they called us up, and they give you 2 All-American plaques. And they just announced it because we didn't have the plaques yet, because you'd get one for the university and one for yourself. But it was nothing fancy. There was nothing like, hey, you just won the national championship, like you see nowadays with all the ticker tape and all the cameras and everything. It was just a meeting room in the hotel room, not very many people in that room. And they called up all the teams that won, and they called up the people that made All-American. And it was just really kind of downplayed.
And what I remember is there were some athletes from other schools that came up and said, "You guys seem so nonchalant, like it's like."
I remember that. Yes.
And well, aren't you guys excited? And I don't know about you, but I was more like, I don't know if I want to say the word I was in shock, but I just didn't know that. I think this was a dream that we.
Yeah, it really was.
This really didn't happen. And here we are 50 years later talking about it, and it changed us.
Oh, very much so.
Can you share a little bit about what it's done for your life being on that team and being a member, being a state champion, and running for Oregon, and having Pre as a roommate, and Bowerman and Dellinger, and that whole crazy Nike weird thing that was happening?
I think all of it goes back to actually to the very roots of the running and getting started running, to where, You have a coach, and in my case, it was Herm Cavanis. I had a wonderful set of coaches: Herm Cavanis, Tony Dolphin, Bill Dillinger, Bill Bowerman. I mean, who can you ask? You can't ask anybody better. And they're the one. They planted that seed in your mind of greatness, and they did it for so many young people. And they look beyond the lack of potential or with the potential. And Herm would come up in the hallway and planning to do it, that headbutt from side and hug you, and you're going to say, "Ace, how's the day going?" I wasn't an ace yet. I was a horrible runner. But he's planting the seed of that you possibly can become that. And it was relentless. He never gave up. And it was the same thing. There was that sense when you step onto the track at Oregon and into those workouts, is that these workouts were going to build us, and we're going to become, remember, the men of Oregon. And I loved Bowerman. We weren't boys anymore. We were always the men of Oregon. He was proud of his men of Oregon. And those setting of goals, those working really hard for things, the persistence, the grit, the resilience that you get from working through injuries and falling and all of those things, I believe sets you up for life. I'm not a runner anymore. You're not a runner anymore. Well, you probably still run some. I don't run anymore at all. I mean, look at me. This body doesn't run. But what it did is all that goes on in the raising of your family, your work, how you treat others, how you set goals. And I still try to push myself. I like pushing myself. I'm still just persistent as all get out. And that all came from running and being part of that whole kind of set of footsteps in time.
And we talked, since our whole thing is footprints, and you mentioned Coach Dolphin and Coach Cavanis and Coach Bill Bowerman and Coach Bill Dillinger. And was there any other Spokaneites that were inspirational? Like, there's a guy named Rick Riley, for example.
Oh my gosh, yes. Rick and I were great friends. We'd go fishing together, hunting together, ran together. He was an idol. I mean, that guy was a good runner.
Can you share with the people that are listening, who was Rick Riley?
So Rick Riley set the state record, and it lasted for decades and decades, of 8:48. I mean, untold of. And the person that broke that was Steve Prefontaine, to give you a sense of time. Jerry Lindgren had ran faster times indoors and in open races, but not in high school races. So really, Rick was the real deal. He ran 3:58 miler, placed very highly in NCAAs. Had age group records, which was really fun because I was able to break some of his age group records when I was running in high school. But always would go on runs with you. And I think it was that belief system. He saw promise in all the runners that went with him. He was a great runner. And then Jerry Lindgren, oh my gosh. And Jerry's coach, again, that person, that one, Tracy Walters. We call him Grandpa Tracy now. And he planted a seed in a young man that was in not the greatest of living conditions. Little guy that's never going to make any team. I mean, just no ball skills. And he put one foot in front of the other. That's the advantage of runners. I mean, we just put one foot in front of the other. And look what Jerry Lindgren did. I think he won 11 or 12 NCAA championships, held world records, national records, beat the Russians for the first time in an American race. Probably would have been right there with Billy Mills in the 1964 Olympics had he not twisted his ankle badly. He was that much of a threat, and he did it for, oh my gosh, a couple decades of running. I got the chance to run with him multiple times. He did his student teaching at Ferris, and I spent a winter running with him, and he'd just toy with me. We'd run together, and I thought, man, I'm staying with him. And then in the last mile, he'd just be gone in that. But I had a wonderful set of, think of all the runners that have come out of Spokane, great runners and great coaches in Spokane.
You graduated from Ferris 1970. So
yeah.
This is an interesting statistic. When you bring up Lindgren, footsteps here, who really set Spokane off the charts with what he did in 1964 and in the Russian American dual meet in Los Angeles
during the Cold War,
beating the Russians, and it was epic on Wide World of Sports, Sports Illustrated front covers, you name it. But we fast forward, you were a senior and ran in the fall of '69 to win the state cross country championship. That same fall, Jerry Lindgren won the NCAA Cross Country Championship, Spokane, and Prefontaine would have his only NCAA loss
Yes.
in his career to a Spokane guy, Jerry Lindgren.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Some good history there.
And so I just wanted to lay that out. Do you remember a couple special stories about Prefontaine as a teammate? You mentioned that he was a great teammate, but was there any, like, can you share a workout or something you did that was like, whoa?
Oh my gosh, there were so many workouts, but the one that always stands out is 30th Avenue. The 30th Avenue workout was one of those ones that you dreaded because it was so challenging. And then also you'd have all these people come out of the woodwork. Kenny Moore, Dave Wellborn. You'd have multiple Olympians show up, Steve Savage, and run this workout. And they rested all week, and we'd been training all week. But I can still remember, you'd run, start with a 3/4 on the track, an embedded 3/4 when you're running past Lane Community College, and then one on the track when you come back. And it's a 10-mile run. And regularly, they were running 48, 47, 48, 45, and it's not flat. I mean, there's that one big brutal hill up towards Lane Community College. And I can remember, I think the last one I can remember Steve running is I know that I ran well. I think I averaged like 3:09 on those 3/4, but Steve ran like 3:05, 3 minutes, and like 2:56 back on the track. And that 2:56 is at the end of a 10-mile. And it was just like, how in the devil does a person do this? And it was just sheer grit. That guy pushed himself like nobody else that I know.
So we could tell a lot of stories about Pre, but in May of 1975, a time that, it freezes you in time.
Yes.
Where were you on that Friday morning when you heard about Steve's death?
I had a clock radio, and when my alarm went off, it was the news about Steve's death. And so there was no question. Got in the car and drove down. It does freeze you in time. It's still unbelievable. I could see him, just the type of person he was. I always had this vision that he would have gone off and, would have raised a family. And I think he would have been a sportscaster. I think he would have mentored lots of young people. I truly believe that Steve would have made a difference in this world and other people's lives. He believed in making a difference. And to have lost him, I mean, we didn't lose just a runner. I mean, I think he held all the American records, distant records from 2,000 meters up at that time. We lost this wonderful man that was a friend to us, a very good friend to us. I mean, think about Pat, you lived with him, 4 years? And I'd known him 4 years. And yeah, we lost a wonderful person.
Yeah, I wanted the audience to know that Pre was such an affectionate guy. He was a hugger. He's just so passionate about life, larger than life, people would say, unusual. Like I said, I mentioned the word hugger.
Yeah.
The ultimate teammate, the low stick that you always wanted. You knew he was going to get the low stick to help the team out. He was always there for us.
Yeah, very much so.
He loved us. And that victory 50 years ago in Knoxville, it was more about the team than about his individual performance. What he cherished so much more than that individual title. And wow, what a legacy. And so you and I were teammates.
Yeah.
And another Spokane connection is that a lot of people don't know is Pre's last race in an Oregon jersey was at Hangman Valley Golf Course, not very far from where we're recording this.
No.
Were you there?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
And he was being chased by a guy from Western Kentucky.
Nick Rose.
What do you remember about that?
I remember because I'll tell you, one is I think he went in with a groin injury. I think he was not running. He was not in peak form, and it was nip and tuck. And what was nice on that course is that you could see the end of it, from behind, but you could actually watch a lot of it from behind. And Nick Rose would surge ahead on him, big surges. And you think, oh, this is, he's going to get beaten by Nick Rose, because Nick Rose was a really good runner. And then little Steve you could just see it. I could see it because you had part of the course, it would go out and back, and you'd see him coming by you as you're going out the other direction. And you could see just this, I'm going to drive myself until I beat this guy. And then he'd surge back. And he didn't even take time to spit, because at the end of that race, he had these spit marks. A lot of races, he'd have spit marks that had drooled across his face. And at the end, I think he beat Nick Rose by 300 meters? It was absolutely a spectacular. About the last mile and a quarter, he probably gained 45 seconds on a guy that was leading him up to that point off and on by 100 meters at times. It was one of the grittiest races that Steve ran. That and the Hailo-Iba race. Yeah.
That's a great story. And you mentioned the Hailo-Iba race. Now, for those who don't know, Hailo-Iba, an Ethiopian who came to the States and went to high school in the States, and I believe in California, who would then go to Oregon State University. The track meets were big at Oregon during this time. As you know, packed house at Hayward Field, the dual meet, Oregon State, Oregon, in Eugene, May, pretty warm day, about 80 degrees, afternoon competition, and rivalry, baby, rivalry. So let's talk about that. I believe it was a 1,500 meters.
1,500 meters.
And Pre's taking on a miler. And Pre's a 5,000 meter runner.
He's a ranked miler. I think he was ranked number 5 in the world at the time.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's true.
Hailo-Iba was an amazing miler, not just a little bit of a miler. Yeah.
So can you take us through the memory of that race?
Yeah, first off, Steve, you're crazy, because what are you doing racing against one of the best milers? And Steve was, he loved the mile. He saw himself and thought himself as a miler, but he was not a miler. I mean, what did he run? 354, 355 his best?
At the time, I think it was the 6th best ever by an American, but he was not a miler. You're right.
Yeah. And so here he's racing Hailo-Iba, and the race was just, it probably is the grittiest race, because every time Iba tried to pass him, he would take him out in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th lane around the corners. And that just took sheer drive. So literally it wasn't a run, 3.5 laps. It was flat out down the straightaway, Iba tucking in, going to pass him right before the curve, and Steve literally just forcing him out and forcing him out and forcing him out and forcing him out. So it was a series of sprints around the corners. And he beat Iba. It was just, I don't remember the time. The time didn't matter. I mean, when you've got thousands standing, standing, cheering, literally you couldn't hear yourself think. And it wasn't that, there was probably 4,000, 5,000 maybe.
Oh, I think there was closer to 8,000.
Yeah.
It was packed.
It was packed. It was Oregon State meet. But for them to see Steve beat one of the best milers in the world at the time on our track, and the strategy that he used, it wasn't that, okay, going to let him kick or whatever. I'm going to take everything out of him and not let him ever pass me. And he never let him pass him. It was remarkable.
Interesting. As you bring up, this story, is just a few months earlier in November, we were in Knoxville.
Yeah.
And just a few months later, we're doing that workout you're talking about, the 30th Street drill.
Yes.
And a few months later, Pre's taking on Hailo-Iba in the duel. And you say crushing Nick Rose a few years later, a couple years later.
Bjorklund the fall before, and Bjorklund was one of the best 6-milers in the world.
In the world.
Yeah.
And so, okay, this is all cool. And then it's July 1972, Eugene, Oregon Olympic trials. Bill Bowerman selected Olympic coach, our coach.
Yeah.
Pre's going to be in a 5,000 epic trials against an old man,
George Young.
35-year-old George Young, 3-time Olympian, by the way, bronze medal winner, 64 steeplechase. What do you remember about the Olympic trials and pre?
One is I remember that I was able to work it, and that was really fun. And I had 2 jobs. One was picking up all the trash in the morning with one of those little sticky things. You go around, stick it, and put it in the garbage sack. But then I had the privilege of taking the placers over to the press tent. So I got to meet everybody that placed in 1972, and that was spectacular. And the best part of it all is I got to go and see Steve in that. So I'm not sure who went up, but we got to go up on one of the towers, a little ways up in the tower. Not a great decision because that tower, there was people screaming so loud, the tower was moving. I think it could have been us also, yelling for Steve. And he ran like 13:22, 13:23. Had he ran that same 5,000 meter time in the Olympics, he would have won.
So, okay, so it's September.
Yeah.
And you're going to be back on campus in a week or two, after the Olympics of 72. What do you remember that Sunday morning live from Munich?
That so much of it is, prefaced by the Palestinians and the Israelis right outside Steve's window. And Steve was extremely human, and that really affected him. I think possibly more than any of the other runners that are in that race. Steve had a absolute human nature to him, that he loved people and he had empathy for people that struggled in the world, really did. And I think that really affected him. I remember the race, and I remember 2 things. One is the conversation that, he was going to run a sub 4-minute mile at the end of 5,000 meters. And I think like 3:54, 3:55. And I can still remember, Ian, no, who was there was Norpoth,
Muhammad
Gamoudi, and then, there it is. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The German, there's Viren, and so there was all the talk that, he is fit enough, and he was easily fit enough to run a sub 4-minute mile at the end of it. But I can still remember the Europeans saying, well, he thinks he's the only one. They were capable of doing it also. Bowerman's strategy at the time was him to do that, really push the pace no matter how slow it was at the start. And I still remember, that had Steve probably ran just the same race he'd ran at the trials, he probably would have been the Olympic champion in that. Again, he wasn't a miler. And there's other people that could still pull out 51, 52s at the end of a 5,000 meter, no matter what. And he could pull out a 54. And you don't beat 51, 52s with a 54. I do remember just the sheer grit of that back and forth between him and Viren, actually the top 4 in that, and that hope that he's going to beat him. And that you didn't know until the very end. I mean, we're only talking the last, 165 meters that it finally starts playing out of how it's going to play out in that. I was so proud of him. He was so broken by that. He saw himself winning, which you should. All of us saw him winning. He was our pre. Steve, he was our friend. And to have him take 4th was, I think we all felt like we lost, not just Steve in that. He took that fall off from running. He still came out and ran with us in that. I think it was the closest they ever came to beating him in a workout in that, but he wasn't mentally right there. And if I could go back and change things, I would love a little magic wand and have him won that. I wanted it that badly for him.
It's funny when you watch the video or the movie, and you see that ending. You never ever give up that he's not going to win. You just know. No, that didn't happen.
I know it. Watch it probably 100 times now. Oh, he's going to win it this time. Yeah.
And of course, I was in the trailer that Sunday morning watching it by myself, by the way. And I remember getting a phone call. I don't even remember who it was from, but I think it was Mike Long, maybe Red Ant teammate from that 50th anniversary team, and just saying, "What'd you think?" And I just said, "Wow, I don't know what to think, because it's so rare to see Pre ever losing, number one. Two, you got to remember, we look back now, he's 21 years old, 3 years out of high school.
And he's running against men.
And he's running against men on the biggest stage in the world after, like you mentioned, the Munich tragedy of the Israelis being slaughtered. And he's, as Pre was pretty tight at not letting people know his stance on political issues or just anything to do with his personal life. He kind of blocked it out. He was good at that. But you could tell the emotions were running that. I mean, here I'm in the Olympic Games and this is the worst thing that could ever happen to anybody. And it's just like, why? This isn't the Olympics that
it's supposed to be pure.
Pure.
Yeah.
So anyway, we would go on. You mentioned that fall Pre would take the break.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we got beat at, I think we got third at that fall without Pre in the Northern Division meet, and I think we were second at Pac 8, maybe third at Pac 8.
It was the year of threes.
Yeah. Oh man, it was horrible. And I remember Dellinger a little frustrated, but Coach Dellinger gave us a workout, and Pre joined us in that workout to show us, you guys are really fit. And it was a 2-mile time trial.
Yeah, I remember it.
What do you remember?
I remember it was almost like we hope with our high school, runners that your top runner goes back and is encouraging and pushing and pulling and that. And that was when I was referring that I almost beat him. And I can remember it was just only in the last 100 meters that he kind of inched ahead. But it was that I'm still your teammate, even though I'm not running with you. And I really want to show you. And we ran really tight and close with him. And we ran really fast.
I think it was like 8 of us, and we were all about 8:52.
Well, it was just boom, 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 boom.
As a controlled 2-mile
Well, I think
run.
we crossed the line almost all together.
And Pre, roughly 4 or 5 weeks after Munich, helped us.
Yeah.
We'd end up, as we were third in our division, third in the Pac 8, we were third at the Nationals.
Possibly one of our best races ever.
Without Pre.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool story. And that was in Houston.
Yeah, it rained, I think, 24 inches the Friday before the race on Monday. Yeah. They didn't even let us on the course, the full course. Started in standing water. And everybody was doing the mamby-pamby, the dance, trying to get their shoes on. We just plunked our butts down into the mud and put our shoes on. Yeah.
And did our thing. I'd like to kind of close things off. We're talking about footprints and people who've made a difference in our lives. And, Bill Bowerman created something that we didn't know what was happening. We were just living it. And we're talking about those waffles. Oh, gosh, yeah. And experimenting with shoes. What do you remember about Bowerman and the shoes? And kind of reflect on that, please. So, I can remember, his experimental shoes. And many of us wore size 10. And I can still remember. Pre was. And we were we'd always sit in the east stands putting our spikes on. Bill Bowerman. Yeah, we'd be sitting in the east stand putting our spikes on or taking them off for the workout over in that little kind of that press box area and that. And we'd see Bill coming with a pair of shoes on his hands. And they're almost always white. And you remembered, didn't the spike plate break last time? Didn't the spikes go through? Didn't the laces break? And you didn't want to make eye contact. I remember that really well. But I also remember going to... It would have been those last few cross-country seasons where Bill was experimenting with the waffle. And if, for people, the waffle sole was the thing. It was one of the first soles specifically made for distance runners. Adidas had soles, but they weren't anything. They were not meant for running on cobble or on mud and whatever. I can still remember that he would take Adidas spikes, and I still have them, and he would literally carve the heel off or the sole off and put a waffle sole on it. And I can still remember Dellinger wearing them on the course while we were, walking the course and running it. And he was testing and see what would keep mud from sticking. And finally he discovered it was Pledge wax. I remember it really well. And we'd spray Pledge on the bottom of those waffle soles. So I can remember, it would have been like
probably the 71, 72, 73 seasons that there was no Nike yet, true Nike Spike. We were wearing Adidas, but with waffle soles on them.
That's right. And do you remember, Bowerman was a hard guy to really get to know. We all know that's Bill Bowerman. Did you get any kind of personal touch from him at all?
I can remember only just like one lesson. He drove a Volkswagen, like the little wagon back then. They had the square back and then. And he drove vehicles till they died. He wore clothes till they wore out. Do
you remember what his license plate was, his personal license plate?
I don't.
Jog 440. Jog 440.
That fits him. I can remember after a poor race, he said, "Hey, I'll give you a ride back up to MacArthur Court." I did not want to get in the car with him in that. And it turned out to be a drive. And it was, well, how'd it go? Well, I ran horribly. He said, "Well, did you run your best?" I said, "No, I didn't run my best." He said, then what were you doing? And the lesson that he ultimately, through all the conversation is that when you ran poorly, you still ran your best for that moment. Either mentally, physically, whatever you could have done, you still ran your best. Otherwise, what would you have done? You would have run faster. And he was pointing out that, there's days that you're not going to run well. Why dwell on those? And run fast. And put it all out there. And I can still remember that drive because I was uncomfortable as all get out in that car.
Yeah.
I knew him for multiple years, and I was always uncomfortable in the presence of Bill Bowerman.
He was godlike.
He really was.
If anybody in the audience wants to read Bowerman, Men of Oregon by Kenny Moore, you'll get a good perspective of this man. We're just nearly done here, Randy. I just kind of like reviewing over footprints. We're talked about your history in Spokane and at Ferris, where you really weren't a great runner initially out the block. I remember the Spokane road race in 1967. I still got that T-shirt that was screened, like stenciled screen.
Yeah, it really was.
And I beat you in that race, but you were just a little sophomore to be, and I didn't see much happening. And then all of a sudden, boom, you hit home runs, and you end up as a teammate. You ended up on this 50th anniversary NCAA championship team, and Spokane boys.
I know. What an amazing journey.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for
Patrick,
joining us.
Thank you. It's been a journey. Yeah. You are loved.
Yeah. And thank you, audience, for being in our first podcast. And I hope you enjoyed it. A little history, unusual, hard to find. And we look forward to hearing and seeing you people again in our next episode. Thank you.